Hello everyone, my name is Evan James and welcome to today's webinar. We're very excited to have all of you guys on this webinar as we're covering a really interesting topic today on player acquisition on a shoestring budget. Just to give you a little bit of information on this, we have one of our experts, Justin Sampson, who's going to be joining us. He leads up our user acquisition team here at Skillz, and he's been working on this for a number of years on really making sure that we're driving as many new players to all of the Skillz-powered games on as limited a budget as possible, especially in some of the beginning years. And so we're really excited to bring some of this content to you guys live today. Just before we get started, there's a couple things. The first is just a general overline of the agenda. We're going to go through the content of it, being the bulk of the agenda, for about 40 minutes. And then we're going to have 10 minutes of Q&A. So if at any point you have any questions, feel free to text them into the chat box, and we will make sure to get to those at the end of the session. Just a few housekeeping items. All participants will be muted throughout the duration of the presentation. This is just to ensure the best audio quality for all. And during the presentation, if you encounter any audio issues, please just try refreshing your browser and check your computer's audio settings. My experience generally when joining these webinars is that makes up for the audio issues about 90% of the time. So just try doing that. If you still have any issues after that, feel free to type it into the chat box and we'll see what we can do to answer your question as quickly as possible. Again, just want to remind you to submit your questions anytime throughout the webinar. Just make sure to click on the chat button to do so, and we'll get to answering those questions at the end of the session. And lastly, no need to type in, "Are you recording today's webinar?" I promise we are, and we'll make sure to share the link in our follow-up. And that way you can listen to it again, you can share it with colleagues who might be interested, and have it for your records. So before we get into the actual content of today's webinar, I do want to just take a quick poll so we have a good understanding of the audience of how large is your monthly player acquisition budget. So we'll give you a couple minutes to just take it some time and click the answers to those, and we'll see what some of the results are. Great, it looks like a lot of the results are coming in, and we can see clearly here that the majority of you guys are in that $1,000 to $5,000 range. So that makes perfect sense for joining this webinar, as it's really about, we're doing focused on paid acquisition, but on a limited budget. So it's great that you're on board with us. So I'm going to turn everything over to Justin, who's going to take it away. I'll be continuing to moderating everything throughout this webinar, but without further ado, I'd like to introduce Justin.
Hey everyone, as Evan said, I'm Justin Sampson. I head up the user acquisition team here at Skillz. I've been here for about 3 years now. Spent the whole time in user acquisition. When we started, we really did not have a big budget to be deploying. So we had to really be thoughtful about every single dollar that we're spending. We still are thoughtful about every single dollar that we're spending. This is the stuff that I love, because there's a level of creativity and there's a level of analytics involved. It's a nice overlap between the two. You get to think creatively on how to message to an audience, with ads. Then you get to be analytical in the way that you iterate, the way that you come up with hypotheses and test those hypotheses in the wild. These are real people that are seeing the ads. It's real data. These are products, new games. So all of that kind of leads into why I love doing this, and so I'm excited to share some of this knowledge with you and help you be successful at user acquisition. So without further ado, let's jump into it. A couple stats to start this off. As you can see, in 2017, the U.S. mobile app install market was about $7.5 billion in ad spend. Non-trivial amount of money, obviously. This is only going up as the market becomes more and more mobile. this is a lot of money. Not everyone has this kind of money to spend, obviously, but this is an industry-wide aggregation. So in terms of average cost for acquiring a user who makes a purchase, we see some discrepancy between iOS and Android across the industry. As you can see here, $71 for iOS, about $59 for Android. And if you're thinking in terms of, you're only going to pay your willingness to pay the LTV of a user, this makes sense because we typically see iOS users having a little more discretionary income and are thus more valuable on average than Android users from an LTV perspective. So this lines up with what we see at Skillz. So less than 2% of the mobile gamers make in-app purchases. Again, industry-wide trend. This is, we see more than that on Skillz games. We're running, don't hold me to it, but probably in the 5% range, which is good. We'll get a little more into some of those metrics at the end of the webinar today. But, from a Skillz perspective, it's not technically an in-app purchase; it's a deposit. That you compete against other people with those funds. It's not actually an in-app purchase. Not necessarily apples to apples. So not every game developer has huge budgets. When I started at Skillz, did not have a very big budget, and through some of the tactics that I'm going to lay out here today, we're able to incrementally iterate on the dollars that we're spending and move that up through positive ROI acquisition. It takes time, but if you stick to the data and the analytics and are very methodical in the way that you run your marketing campaigns, it is very possible to slowly but surely scale up your budget to something that is more substantial scale, whatever you want, really. You just need to stick to the data and be a little creative.
And I'm sure we're going to cover this a little bit more, but at least on the B2B side, what we often see is when you're competing against somebody with a much larger budget and you're competing against the same audience, it's often a challenge for somebody that has a little bit less of the dollars at hand to spend as somebody who's a large enterprise. Is it really about just kind of making those incremental steps into the direction of ROI positive campaigns when you're really having a much smaller budget?
Yeah, I would say it's even more important because as you have a larger budget, it's more difficult to watch every single dollar. If you're spending $10 million a month, you need a small army of people to watch that, and make sure that every dollar is being spent effectively. With a smaller budget, you can really get into the nitty-gritty levels of data around your campaign and be a little more nimble around how you're spending that money, and that will lend itself to a level of efficiency that allows you to scale more effectively.
Totally makes sense. Well, cool. Let's jump right into it.
So, broken this down to a few different, pillars, if you will, of what's going to make a successful paid acquisition strategy. There's a bunch of strategies around non-paid acquisition. You have SEO, get featured, get yourself on some blogs, promote yourself on social media. Those are fairly straightforward with plenty of materials online. This is going to be focused primarily towards paid acquisition strategy. So those pillars are data tracking, analytical insights, creative messaging and audience. Hugely important, all three of these things. And then it's important to be patient and have a great product. So let's start off with data tracking. So number one thing with data and tracking is integrating a mobile measurement partner. We call it just an MMP. These are people who are companies that allows you to track the efficacy of your campaign at a user level. So, we use Coachava. That comes integrated in the Skillz SDK. And so I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with how mobile tracking works at a high level. Effectively, these MMPs will aggregate the data from all the different partners that you're running. Say you're running a website or Apple Search or something like that. They're going to track the device of an ID, or the ID of the device, I should say, upon the click of the tracking link. And then they're going to capture that device ID once the mobile app has been installed and launched, and then say, okay, this device clicked from this source, then it launched the install, obviously because we're baked into the SDK, therefore it's reasonable to make the conclusion that this install came from this source, from a device ID user level. And so once you have that, you can begin to understand which users came from which networks, which ads, which audiences, and then you pair that up with the cost from the ad network, what you're paying for this different creative, for this user that came from this campaign, and then you can enable yourself to look at the cost and profit, the profile analysis of an advertising campaign, and this allows you to think critically about where your dollars are going. Without the tracking, you're flying blind. So this really is the basis of digital marketing.
And Justin, how would you recommend when you're looking at onboarding these mobile measure partners? What are some of the kind of key things that you would look at for deciding which MMP you want to go with?
Yeah, good question. Number one, I look at costs, right? These things, they all have costs. They're pretty marginal, but they do have differences in terms of, do they charge per event, per click, per install? Just take a look at the rate cards of these different mobile measurement partners. Two, I would say their ability to fight fraud. Fraud is pretty rampant in our industry. It's fairly new. And as you get further and further outside the, I guess, quote unquote, walled gardens of the big main advertisers, it does become an issue, and you want to make sure that you are protected against fraud, thinking diligently about fraud. We have a good relationship with Coachava, into which they help prevent fraudulent installs coming into our system. And then number three, I would say the ease of integration. That's, how long is it going to take you to integrate? How easy is it? How good is documentation? Is the partner going to help you if you're running into hiccups, things like that?
Great. So essentially, so we have cost, fraud, and ease of integration as the top three things. Totally makes sense.
Yes. All right. Number two, analytical insights. So we have a nice funnel here to the left, which is really, how you should really be viewing everything. Impressions, clicks, installs, purchases, and then ultimately what you get in purchases. And then, layer on top of impressions, you have cost as well. So, the first thing to do really, once you're up and running and you're putting dollars into your advertising campaigns, you really want to compare the quality of the different campaigns. So, when I say quality, it's not some kind of nebulous term of maybe this is good, maybe this is bad. This is a quantifiable level of insight that is, what is performance. And so, a lot of times people focus on CPI, getting cheap CPI is not necessarily the end-all be-all of a performance campaign. We really want to be focused on CPA and ROAS. For us, CPA, we're looking at a cost per new paying user, and then we benchmark our cost per new paying user on what that user is going to be worth in 180 days. You also want to be looking at the ROAS, the return on ad spend of your specific campaign. So, say you spend $100, right, the first day, and then you get $10 back in day one, 10% ROAS. In 7 days, you get $30 back, 30% ROAS. 100 days, 180 days, you get $100 back. That would be 100% ROAS. So, understanding your LTV of your game it's a difficult thing to do. That's why it's so important to build a quality product, have a good game, so the LTV is going to be there. It's not crashing. People are having a good experience. It's playable. It's engaging. But it's difficult, but it's crucial. To operate in ROI positive budget. So now that we have our KPI of success defined, what this allows you to do now is look at the different elements of your marketing campaigns and generate hypotheses around what is actually working and being performant versus what is not. You're going to be able to, say you're running 10 different marketing campaigns, you're going to be able to stack rank them and see which one is better, which one is worse, and why are the best three the best three? Why are the worst three the worst three? Right? And then you can kill the budget for the worst few, reallocate that to the top ones, and then make some iterations around the top three or whatever your number is, such that your level of efficient spend just keeps piling on top of each other, and that's how you grow efficiently, in a stable way. So, a lot of people, user acquisition strategies are to spend a ton of money up front and then harvest the users. Well, that doesn't really work if you don't have the budget to do something like that. So this is why this kind of iterative process of finding the most performant dollars being spent and then putting more money there and making iterations based on why you think those are working is the way to do user acquisition on a Shoestring budget. And, this small level testing can be done through a number of self-service advertising platforms outside of the traditional Facebook, Google giants. You can do this small level testing on Apple search ads. You can do it on AppLovin. You can do it on Bungle. There are a variety of different self-service advertising networks that allow you to put up your creative, see the audience that you're putting it on, and make the adjustments on only a few dollars of spend. You don't always need to wait for big levels of, or significant levels of spend or statistically significant results just to be sure that the thing that you thought wasn't working actually isn't working. If you think it's not working, just shut it down. And focus on the stuff that is working. I always try to focus on the winners and understanding why the winners are winners and putting money on those as opposed to trying to make a loser a winner. You'll find that that's really going to lend yourself to a much higher level of results. At least it has to be.
And how long should you let one of these tests run before you determine whether a winner is a winner? Is it kind of a determined amount of time? Does it depend on the scenario?
So the way we typically do it is we have thresholds around different levels of the funnel. So we have a click-through threshold. So if the campaign is not performing within only a few dollars of spend from a click-through perspective, we'll shut that down on $5 of spend. You spend $5, you got no clicks, and say you needed, in order for the whole funnel to back out, you needed 2 clicks on $5 to even be in range. If you have 0, either you're so far skewed on the distribution that you're going to get 4 clicks in the next dollar, which is highly unlikely, or it's just not a very performant campaign. So you can shut it down. Then after you've moved through click-through rate or cost per click, then you get to installs. If you're, I've said that installs are not the end-all be-all. There is a range of install prices that you should be willing to pay based on conversion rates that you've seen. So if you're paying through the roof for an install, and you need some crazy conversion from install to purchaser ratio or rate to make that work out, you can make the call quicker and say, hey, this isn't going to work, cut my losses, try again. Cool. So another piece here that's really important to the user acquisition effort is the creative. You want to be trying to pair your creative with your audience and taking an audience-first approach. How can we communicate to these people that we're targeting in an effective way? So one question you might have is, how do you produce creatives cheaply? You don't have an ad agency coming up with ideas for you. So how do you get this executed? How do you come up with the idea? So I think there's a level of creativity that can be applied to the coming up with the ad, but to the execution of the ad itself. Since we're on a shoestring budget, you might consider learning Photoshop. There's lots of tutorials online that can allow you to do some basic things like turn photos into a slideshow or a video. Do some basic animation. And you don't need much to really execute on a good ad. Some of the first ads I ever made were in Paint. They were pretty low production ads that I think people liked that because it brought itself a level of trust. It's not some high polished expensive ad. It was an authentic, funny ad that people really related to, I should say. And that's what allowed, at the beginning, us to spend more money efficiently on these ads. So, when you come up with a hit creative, that can really change the game on how much you're able to deploy effectively. So how else can you get some creative cheaply? You can put up a contest on design website. We've run some ads from put up some contests on Design 99. If you have a school in the area, maybe there's a college student who knows Photoshop that can execute on an idea for you. There is a global workforce out there that you can connect with online. They'll be able to execute your ideas cheaply and effectively. Crucial to have good communication. To get your design executed the way you want it. So, like I said, there's room for creativity on generating the concepts themselves, but also in the production of the content. So once we have our creative, you want to test a wide variety across different audiences to understand what's working and where. We always start out new games, new audiences. We set up what we call a test matrix, to where we have maybe the creatives going down on the rows, and then the audiences on the columns, and then we'll just mark off which ones are working and which ones are not. So you can then see the pattern emerge around which creatives are effective, which audiences are effective. Say you have an audience, say you're running 5 different creatives across 5 different audiences, then you see that, one of the creatives isn't working on any of the audiences. Well, maybe that creative is not very good, versus one of the creatives that is working on every single audience. Where are you going to spend your time, and where are you going to iterate? Well, the one that's working across all the different audiences. And say one of the audiences is not working, doesn't have any creatives that are hitting on it. So maybe the problem isn't the creative, maybe the problem is that audience doesn't align very well with what you're doing. And so being able to structure these tests in a way that allows you to make those insights report. I view everything as a test, and then the tests that are successful get scaled up, the tests that aren't successful get shut down, but there's learning to be had always. So, while from a total portfolio and spend evaluation perspective, we do want to be focused on CPA and ROAS. When we are looking to iterate on creative, we do want to look at the entire funnel. And different metrics here do have different meanings, right? So you have the click-through rate. How clickable is your ad? How good are you at turning impressions into upper funnel action clicks? Then you have the click to install ratio, something called the CDR, the conversion ratio. I like click to install because those are the pieces of the funnel that, the nomenclature that I use to. And how relevant is your ad? So, you click, get to the App Store. How many of these people are going to install? You want to make sure, obviously, the game's good, you have good reviews, but if you have an ad that isn't super relevant, people are going to click it. They'll get to the App Store, realize this is nothing like what they were expecting, and then, they'll leave. So, you might see that as clickbait. We'll get into that in a second. And then, the monetization. How well does your ad communicate the value proposition? Skills, competition, prizes, different levels of social engagement. These are the aspects that we're communicating. And if we've done this right, we're going to see a high monetization rate. So, like I said before, high CTR, low CTI, we'll call that clickbait. You see this all the time. Something that's just not very relevant, but it's still kind of funny. Ideally, you can have something that's relevant, funny, and communicates your value proposition. And then you can have a low CTR, high monetization rate. Well, this isn't very engaging from a click perspective, but it does communicate the value proposition. So, sometimes here you might see a high CPI, but you'd be willing to pay it sometimes because you know that those users monetize well, they convert well into payers. It's just a matter of understanding. Additionally, with messaging, you really just want to figure out what are the core buckets of messaging types that are going to be resonant with respect to your value proposition in the game. Skills, prizes, competition, condensed entertainment. These are things that we are coming up with ideas based upon. Also, social engagement as well. And then we'll come up with ad ideas that fall into these buckets, and then we'll aggregate those metrics and understand which ones are performing the best, and again, see where the right place to be spending. So that's the hidden cost on all of this, right? How much time are you spending, and how are you prioritizing your spending? You just want to really be ruthless in your prioritization against things that are performing.
And so if a game developer was launching a game and they were running one of these messaging exercises, how would they kind of determine, all right, here are the core different buckets of messaging that we're going to put in, and how are we going to test it and determine which ones are the top performing buckets?
I would say think about why a person is playing the game. Are they playing it for just casual time-wasting entertainment? Do you think they're going to be playing on their commute? Is that a thing that you might expect out of a casual game or something? Or are they a little more hardcore? Are they sitting down and playing for hours in their living room? Where are they going to be playing? Try to get into the mind of someone who's using your game and playing your game, and think about those motivations, and then from those motivations will emerge these types of messaging buckets.
I'm a total commute gamer, so I would definitely resonate well with that messaging.
Cool. So, moving along to the audiences here, it's going to be important to test a wide variety of audiences to get data around some of the hypotheses that we were just talking about. If commuters really are the group, we can target that. We can target commuters and see how this messaging is performing on test that hypothesis, right? So we can do that with mothers, gamers, game enthusiasts, board game lovers, all of these different types of metrics. We can try to test our creative on, see which one is the most resonant. Again, it's important to take an audience-first approach, because if you're showing an irrelevant ad to your target group, it's not going to perform. The question was brought up around how to necessarily compete with some of the big budget, advertisers. Well, relevance is a big one. If you're creative, it's really geared towards that audience. That click-through rate, that install rate is all going to be factored into the algorithms of these different networks and prioritize your posts. And so you can do that because you're not paying, a ton of money for creative like some of these big brands are. They don't really have the flexibility to make those minor level adjustments across different audiences. They do kind of that. Here's the creative, put it across multiple different audiences, maybe it'll work. So, number 4 here is really be patient. Users inherently, by definition, have a lifetime value. It is not immediate. So it's going to take some time for the users to stack up, cohorts start stacking, and start generating revenue. So, you really want to keep a keen eye on your efficiency, on your ROAS. Make sure that that's backing out for you. And then just be spending more on ROI positive campaigns, or campaigns that you project to be ROI positive, so that you're not wasting dollars on poor performing campaigns. Every dollar that you are spending, you should really know what you're trying to learn, or it's a performant dollar from the ROI perspective. And sticking to that is what allows you to scale up.
And for determining sort of the LTV of a player, how long should you be looking at run and understanding how much they're going to deposit or purchases before you're able to really determine what that LTV is?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, LTV is one of the harder things to determine. There are ways to determine it from the engagement and retention on average, ARPDAU of your users. And there's some formulas online that give you a generic projection of what your LTV is going to be. And as you are promoting your game longer, you'll get to the point where you have actuals around, how much were users worth in 30 days from what you predicted them to be worth. And then you can begin to understand your LTV. So at the beginning, in a nutshell, at the beginning, you need to have a cursory kind of idea of what the LTV could be based on initial engagement metrics. You don't want to make a judgment too quick, on the users, but eventually you'll have those actual numbers to compare against. So, the LTV question is a good one. It's always going to come up. But the idea is really, with a great game comes a great LTV. And the best marketing plan is not going to overcome a bad product, a bad LTV. So, really focus on making that game fun, engaging, good player experience, and the LTV will you want to make it familiar, usable, engaging. You can play it so that a user can play it for multiple hours a day. These are the ones that we see perform the best. So to recap, we have five pillars really. Data and tracking, getting set up with an MMP, analytical insight, beginning to think critically about the performance of your dollars, and then creative messaging and audience. How can we iterate and make our performance even better using what we know about creative, about the audience, and types of messaging that people bring. And then, be patient. This takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. The cohorts need to stack up in order for you to start generating revenue. And then finally, having a great product is really what's important here. And so that's a good introduction, I guess, into Skillz, and this is exactly where we come in. So we built out the competition layer that you need to transform your mobile game, solitaire, puzzle, sports, into a competitive multiplayer sports game. This is an innovative new monetization stream that hasn't really been around before. And it really does monetize users much better than casual regular gaming. Because mobile gamers that are competitive tend to be more engaged. Their willingness to pay is greater than just single player mode, play against yourself. We see up to 6 times better monetization in competitive gamers versus regular gamers. They also play about twice as long as single player gamers, which is pretty incredible. These people are playing every day because this is something. This is just part of their life, and that's a powerful concept. Playing every day and integrating that competitive and social nature is what drives a lot of people to use that, to have that level of engagement. And so, as a developer, how do you generate revenue from this? Well, the competitions are player funded. So, your players are depositing into the game to engage in that high stakes or low stakes for real prizes or virtual prizes competition against other real people. We're providing the refereeing and all of the back-end infrastructure to allow this to happen. And you're generating revenue by taking a piece of profit margin on every tournament that the game plays. Our top winner in 2017 took home about $460,000, and that puts our top developers in the top 10 in revenue per install in the entire App Store. Considering that this is a monetization mechanism outside of ad revenue and in-app purchase, like we talked about, this is pretty impressive. Considering that this hasn't been around before, and this is a new way to monetize your users. And so, to date, players have won over $330 million, which is incredible. I remember when we were at 20 million a few years ago. So that just shows the rate of growth, and the velocity of tournaments that are being played through the system, and engaging and captivating players. So this really is pretty incredible in my mind. We have here that the average Skillz player spends about 61 minutes a day on our platform, which is nearly double the industry average. So an hour a day. That's pretty incredible when people are playing that much. So, last but not least, I touched on it a little bit, but Skillz really has proven to boost revenue for different mobile game types. On average across our platform, developers who have integrated with Skillz and made a multiplayer game have increased D30 retention by 24%. On average, boosted their revenue per daily active user by about 18 cents. And we talked about this being outside of pay-to-play ads, in-app purchases. This is all competition-based, so there is no impact to existing revenue streams. This is an alternative, additional revenue stream that allows you to monetize users that either further monetize users or monetize users that previously weren't monetized, and engaging that real core audience base that's just going to play every day and stick around.
Great. Well, thank you, Justin, for that amazing presentation on covering, kind of the 5 key tips or areas that you see for really driving player acquisition and giving us a run through Skillz. We're going to jump into Q&A, but I can see that there's a couple of people that have already understand what I'm getting to. We're going to take one more poll quickly here. Just if you would like to learn more about how Skillz can help monetize your game. Just going to give you a couple minutes, and then during the meantime, we'll look into some of the questions. I saw a number of them coming in, and we'll get to answer those. Just give it a few more minutes here. It looks like we have a number of people submitting their polls coming in as we speak, so we'll get right into Q&A after that. All right, cool. So jumping into some of the Q&A questions, we'll take a question from Gabrielle. The question is, hey guys, besides the mentioned search ads and App 11, what networks have shown success for Skillz games? UA ads.
Yeah, for sure. Search ads and App 11, of course, just a few. We have success with Facebook. They're a major player in the space. For a while we were running a lot on Facebook. Now we're seeing success with a variety of other app networks. DSPs are working out well for us. Demand-side platforms. We also see success with some of the other networks. AdCom, video ad networks. They're big players in the space. They have a lot of ad inventory that you can bid on at a granular level. You can see where your ads are being shown in what games, and then focus your budget on the games that are the most performant from an ROI install perspective. So those are just a few.
Cool. From Scott, we have a couple of different questions here. He wrote, 10 marketing campaigns sounds like shooting in the dark without a laser sight. Really a few dollars. How does that reach enough people, and what's an install?
Sure. So I called out 10 marketing campaigns as kind of a generic number. You start running however marketing campaigns you want to start running that your budget will allow you to run. In terms of operating only on a few dollars, this is a tiered. The way I've always thought about it is a tiered approach. So if you're trying to make decisions at a CPA level, you want to have a few new paying users before you really make that decision. But say you're operating on a smaller budget. If you've spent $5, $10 and you haven't gotten a click, and your previous data has shown that within those $5, $10, you really need to have had 10 clicks already, and you don't have any, I think that is enough to make a decision. And you might actually see that from an impression to click perspective, that's going to be a significant result. versus it might not be significant from an impression to an install perspective. So as you make decisions further and further down the funnel, you are going to have to spend more and more to have a little more confidence around that. The few dollars remarked was around the CTR specifically.
Cool, and I can see that we have a number of different questions coming in, so feel free to continue to answer questions and we'll answer those. The next question that we have is from Carol. Since Android isn't allowed on Google Play Store, how difficult is it to acquire users and let them know about your authenticity?
So, since Android isn't allowed in the Play Store, we're primarily focusing on iOS acquisition. So a requirement that we have around any network that we're going to be focused on using is that they have that OS target, so the target the iOS devices and get them specifically. And so in terms of letting them know about the authenticity of the product, through the advertising, we have a variety of different creative types that really bring out the authenticity of the experience and the legitimacy of the product. We also are focused on in-game showing some of the awards that Skillz has won, the different features that we have had in high-profile articles, like last year being number 1, I think 5,000. That's featured within the game. And so these things kind of speak to the trust and authenticity of the service that overcome Android on Google Play Store.
Cool, that definitely makes sense. In terms of, we'll have about time for one more question. So let's ask a question from Gabriel. Do the mentioned networks, AppLovin, Ad Colony, etc., have an approval process for money-based games similar to Facebook?
So no, there's a lot less red tape here. Maybe we can tackle two of these that want to go. So there's a lot less red tape here. You can create an account, jump on there, and start advertising. Especially with AppLovin, Ad Colony is more of a managed service, and this is kind of, it's a function of how large the ad network is, and so, Facebook is a little more policy restrictive. We're building out process to get people approved and find ways for them to advertise on Facebook. That's not rolled out yet, which is why I mentioned some ad networks that's a little easier to run on off the bat that will allow you to make the adjustments that you need to make on smaller levels.
That definitely makes sense. So we'll have time for probably just one more question. We have a question from Sean. Any anti-fraud precautions we can make to the app?
I think this one, from a fraud perspective, is going to be following the data around the installs. We've had issues where we've been charged for a multitude of installs, and then upon looking into the quality of those installs, we haven't seen players play a game. And so when you see a bunch of people installing a game and then the title and then not playing it at all, that should have your fraud, senses. Those should start tingling. So I would say, within the app, somewhat more ambiguous within the app data for sure. It's just important to check in those engagement apps. Running incentivized traffic. Make sure that there are actions taken beyond just the incentivized action. So following that data is crucial. Yeah, so I touched on it a little earlier. So does Skillz plan on making it easier to get whitelisted from Facebook, Google, That's right. Skillz games, we need documentation from Skillz to make it happen. So we're working on building out the process here with respect to Facebook. So stay tuned in the coming weeks and months. We know that you guys really want to be promoting on Facebook. So you know there's a multitude of different factors to take into account here from our side. And so we're working on building that out. So we appreciate your patience while we do that. Stay tuned for what's coming on that in the future.
Cool. Well, thank you, Justin, for answering all those Q&A, and thank you to everybody who joined the webinar and asked all these great questions. I know we didn't have time to get to all of them, but we will be following up with both the recording of this, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Just a quick note to, if you are interested in learning more about Skillz, please check out developers.skillz.com or launch at skillzdev.com to get just more information about how you can go live with the Skillz game. And big thank you to all of you for joining. Very much enjoyed having you guys on and look forward to the next webinar. Thank you, Justin.